Record on computer. Don't you love that voice?
Recording in progress.
This is Adam.
In progress. What? Sorry.
That's all right. This is Adam from Model of Control, and I'm talking with Lesley Rankine, ex of Silverfish, still of Ruby, and you've been in various other things. You never seem to quite stop, at least for a while.
Well, no, I did. I stopped for about 12 years, and I moved to the countryside and had a kid, got married, all that sort of stuff. Had chickens and ducks and stuff, and then that got really boring. And I started making music again in about 2013, 2014 or something? 2013 it was.
Right. Yeah.
Aye, and put an album out in 2014.
That was Waiting for Light, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I've just been trundling along since then, and then I got back in touch with Martin Atkins a few years ago, and ended up getting back into doing Pigface stuff. So that's been really good fun. It's been great playing in a band again. And you know, the tour that we did in 2019, the folk on the tour bus were just brilliant. It was quite possibly, I mean, we're all saying that it's possibly the best tour any of us have ever done. And we've got a combined age of 850,000 or something by now, and there was like 17 of us on the bus, old farts, farting away, complaining about our joints and stuff like that. Not the ones you smoke, the ones that make all the noises when you get up out of a chair now, that sort of thing. So
let's start with Pigface then, because I'm painfully aware that Silverfish comes before your involvement in Pigface originally.
Yes.
But it seemed to end on not a great note, and I know you've talked about that in the press in the past, but how did it feel returning to this after all this time? Did it feel like kind of a natural thing to return to?
Aye, definitely. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember what I said in the press about why I did stop doing stuff with Pigface. I think it was mostly that I was just doing Ruby stuff all the time. It wasn't so bad. It ended badly with Silverfish. That was really shit. But Pigface wasn't too bad. But I mean, Martin and I had our differences. But no, I mean, we're all kind of gotten past it, you know. And it was so great. I remember vividly walking into the rehearsal room before the big reunion gig in 2016, I think it was, and Mary Biker was there. Now, Mary Biker and I go back a long way, and we hadn't seen each other for at least 20 years, you know, and just seeing Mary there and stuff. So, and then Chris Connelly was on the last tour and stuff, and seeing him for the first time in 25 years or something, you know, it was just brilliant.
My wife and I very nearly redid our honeymoon to make it to that reunion show in Chicago, because our honeymoon started in New York 2 days afterwards, and we were kind of afterwards kicking ourselves that we didn't go, should we just fly to Chicago, do that, and then get on to New York and do it from there? And we probably should have done. And it wasn't the only gig we missed, because we missed the Kidney Thieves in LA by a night as well. And it was just all too tightly timed. But it's one of those things, my eternal regret was not doing that. But it sounded amazing, what I saw online.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good fun. I think at the end of that was the most tired I've ever been in my life. And I had swine flu. And I don't know why. I caught some virus there that gave me pink eye in both eyes. It was really bad. And I went to my friends in Seattle for a couple of days, and then I flew down to start my own tour in LA. A couple of days after, I think it was. And by the time I arrived in LA, I was starting to get scratchy eyes. And then I got, I had to hire a car to go and stay with my mates at the opposite end of LA, from the opposite corner from the airport. And by that time, my eyes were starting to swell up and feel like sandpaper. And I had to drive through LA and they gave me a pickup truck or something, which is quite good because I was sitting up high. But I had to drive through, and then I had to do a gig and there's photos of me doing that gig is with these massive puffy eyes, and I look like the Elephant Man.
And LA's bad enough to drive through, right?
Yeah, and it was like a Friday afternoon as well.
Nice.
so that was good. That's the most I got out of that Pigface gig was a dose of pink eye. So that's, yeah, you always catch something when you hang out with that lot.
Well, there's enough of them, I guess. So
yeah, exactly. It's just a big petri dish.
Well, they said there's something weird about Pigface in that they don't really sound like anyone else because they're that enormous collective. There's so many hands involved in it, and I've seen there's been a couple of newer bands that have tried to do something similar of like this industrial collective, and it's just like, but you're not Pigface. I mean, you're not kind of bringing that manic energy that it has, and I think there's you go back to what Martin did in the Damage Manual as well with like that kind of the power that he was involved in with that. I think Pigface I think gave a voice to a number of people for better or worse in some cases, but there's some great stuff out of it. And my wife turned out to be a fan, and I was really surprised when I first heard that because it was not what I would have thought she'd listen to. But
see, when I listen to Pigface stuff, I don't really see industrial, maybe kind of earlier stuff, and it is born out of everybody was involved or in some kind of industrial band, at some point. But to me, it doesn't sound like it. It's much more fluid. And I don't know, like you say, loads of different influences and loads of different textures and I suppose ideas for loads of different folk. There's something like 500 members.
Yeah, the wiki page with the list of people that's been involved is ridiculous because it goes on for page after page, and you're like, oh, come on.
I know. Quite mental, isn't it? I mean, why would you not want to be involved in that?
Well, of course. Yeah,
that kind of madness,
And then at the flip side, of course, you mentioned Ruby. And when you first came out, when Ruby first appeared, I remember it as a bolt from the blue because Saltpeter sounded frankly like nothing else at the time. There was some people tried to lump you in as trip hop, but I don't think you were anything to do with that. And I think you were there was a kind of a darker side to what you were doing in many ways. And in fact, I will do the plugging now because I have my copy of the new version of Saltpeter here. So there we go.
Yeah, good.
Is that showing properly?
Yeah,
pretty much.
It's about right. Yeah. And then, that's the new one? Did you get? Yeah. Was it a paraffin or a red one you got?
It's the paraffin color.
Is it?
Yeah,
it's a lovely color, isn't it?
It really is. If that comes out very well. And it sounds amazing as well. And and I think it kind of does justice to an album that was a little bit ahead of its time, I think, at the time. I mean, is it correct that it was the first album fully constructed on a laptop?
No, it wasn't on a laptop. I mean, you couldn't really do stuff on laptops then. It was touted at the time as being the first entirely digital album, but it wasn't. I think it was somebody like Ry Cooder or something did that in 1979 or something, but ours was the second, or something like that. I mean, it's certainly at that time, everybody else was still using tape. And we just thought, oh, fuck that. But it wasn't a laptop, it was the old desktops with the big massive screens and stuff, and like a whole album was on, I think the whole of Saltpeter was on a 1 gig hard drive.
Wow.
And even then, 1 gig, we were thinking, that's massive. Loads of stuff on that,
How's it been to return to that over the last year? Because obviously you've been drip feeding a number of reworkings of the songs and obviously remastering and re-releasing it. How does it feel to listen to it again 25 years on?
It's great. I mean, I still love it. I still love the album, and I have really enjoyed that. I mean, that was the greatest thing about last year, was having to focus on that, remaking that album, and especially remaking it with my brother. And I don't know if you know, but our mum had just died at the beginning of lockdown.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
So it was a bit of a shit time. Shut up, cat. and so having to focus on that, and both of us being together, we had to be together in our mum's house to try and clear the house and get it ready for sale and stuff during the lockdown and stuff. And it was all just a bit of a nightmare, but having to focus on that was a relief. And it was quite inspiring, and also totally rebuilding the tracks for the ground up. It's, I don't know, I mean, it's so much more pleasant, I think is the word, you know, than having whenever you're writing something completely new and having to find your way through it. It's like a puzzle. You have to find your way through it and figure out how you're going to make all the different parts of it work. Whereas when you have songs that you know so well, this is Wookie, by the way.
Hello.
When you have songs that you know so well, it's going to start kicking up stuff across the table. It's just so much easier. It's so much more fun, kind of thing. And there's still an element of kind of trying to find your way, make it completely new, and give it a completely new type of character. You know, and especially there's the songs like Heidi is this. It was the original versions is this tiny little, very dark, very sparse song, and this thing is the new one's like some prog rock mentalness, you know. So it was really refreshing, and it did a huge amount for my self-confidence as well, because I've always had a total kind of imposter syndrome about doing all the production myself and stuff, you know. I've like Waiting for Light, I did most of that just on my own. And even though I did it and I really like the sound of it and I really like the songs, and you know, when it comes to writing new stuff again, I was really nervous and thinking, oh, it's just going to be shit. Oh, it's just going to be shit. It's really, really shit. But working on Saltpeter was just brilliant. It did a huge amount for my self-confidence and my sense of freedom in production, you know, because I was just farting about, you know, just making up wee farty noises, drum beats to them and stuff. And so, it's a relief.
It was interesting as well, because I remember I saw you in London a few years ago when you played in Dalston at that tiny little venue.
The Seven Jazz Quarters. You did the review. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
very nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I love that show, and it was great hearing you giving new perspective to some of the older songs. Because obviously, you know, it's obvious you've always kind of liked toying with the songs and kind of maybe re-evolving them. And I think some of these new versions are even different from those. And I was kind of. You know, the way you've dialed back some of the songs that were more aggressive originally and vice versa, I think is quite a nice little touch. What? Because I know you had difficult times with the second album, Short Staffed at the Gene Pool. Does that one hold much for you anymore?
I definitely, there are songs there that I still really love, like Lily Pad. I think I started reworking that for live. And I should really do a new version of Beefheart, because it's quite a big stonker, you know.
It is a great song, yes.
So, I mean, there are some really good songs on that, and that didn't get nearly as much attention. I think by that time, I suppose, by the time Short Staffed came out, Creation had kind of imploded, and Sony was just up its own arse and stuff. So, it never really got the attention that Saltpeter did, but no, I would quite like to rework them, and I do rework them I often think, actually I think that I wonder what folk think of the versions that I do live, because they are always different, and I redo them or revisit them almost every time I go out to do a gig. You know what I mean? I start tweaking stuff, and I add stuff, and I break stuff down, and you know, and I have like 3 different versions of every song, kind of thing, you know. So I often wonder if folk in the audience are really enjoying hearing something new, because a lot of them, like Grace, I think is far better than the original live, because it's just mental, and basically the more mental something is, the more I'll like it. But I wonder if the audience are thinking, oh, I wish you'd play the original version. I like that better. I didn't play to hear stuff I haven't heard before. You know what I mean?
I kind of think that's an interesting thing, actually, because I kind of think I got the impression reading the comments online is always a terrible thing to do, but I get the impression sometimes that your fans are actually quite happy with what you do and quite happy to go along for the ride, and like, well, I mean, if she wants to redo them, fine. Why are we going to argue? Because often they come out like, oh yeah, it's this, because there's something wonderful about hearing a song live in a different format, and your brain is there going, I know this. Hang on a minute, and then it kind of ticks in, and your brain suddenly goes, oh wait a minute, I know what this is now. And the kind of the fun of almost rediscovery, because you kind of look at a song, it makes you look at a song in a new light. And I guess that brings us on to the elephant in the room and the album that was re-released this week, which is Fat Axel by Silverfish.
Yes.
I mean, it was a pretty anarchic time when the album came out, when that album and Organ Fan came out. And obviously the scene at the time, I mean, I actually picked up a copy of Lost Alternatives on vinyl this weekend, the Steve Lamacq album that's got Big Baby Bad Tech Squeal on it. And it sounds amazing, nice and loud, of just like, yeah, this is cool. What do you, looking back now, was it as kind of almost a kind of a press-led thing of all these bands coming out of Camden and whatever? Was there actually something in it?
I don't know. I suppose it's I would say. I mean, for us, we were just involved in it, so we had I certainly had no idea what was going on in any other part of the country or any other town. I mean, I'm sure every other town around the country has some kind of music scene going on, and certainly at the time, everything, there was no internet and there was no digital, and it was all analog in one place in your face, if you were into that sort of music. So there must have been lots of different wee scenes everywhere, but it's certainly surrounding the Falcon in Camden. I mean, there was a different band there every night of the week, and they were all brilliant. I mean, you never got a shite band there, and there's loads of other places as well. But at the Falcon that was just our haunt, really. And there were so many different bands that.
And it makes me slightly sad when I look at what is Camden now, in that there isn't a lot there anymore. I mean, I'm actually going to the Electric Ballroom tomorrow night for my first post-COVID gig to go and see Arab Strap. So that'll be fun, watching a man confess his sins, mumbling into his microphone with a bottle of red wine for the evening. Excellent. But is there much else of Camden left? Probably not. And it's kind of this, it's changed. London changes, that's fine. But I think we've lost something that was quite special in the 90s in Camden. But what did you think of listening back to Silverfish again? Was it something you've done much in the meantime?
Well, I always have periodic returns to Silverfish, and especially within, probably not the last year, but the last couple of years, kind of introducing my son to it, because for a while he was like, "Is that you, Mom? That's quite good. That's not nearly as shite as I thought it would be." So there's been that, and I really do enjoy listening to it. It's brilliant. I mean, it was brilliant. It was such a special time. And I don't know if every 25-year-old says this, or, every 25-year-old of every generation says, "Oh, it was such a special time." Maybe it was, but it is for that time in your life, is for everybody. I don't know, but for us, definitely, it was brilliant.
Because it's I've got my copy on order, and it hasn't arrived yet, so I haven't been able to listen to how the remaster sounds. But it is notable that the old releases do sound pretty thin nowadays, so they were definitely needing a remaster.
Definitely. And also, I think nowadays we kind of, I think when vinyl used to be the standard, it was usually on just thinner, cheaper vinyl, and whatever kind of old bucket of plastic was in the corner of the room, you slap that on, and it wasn't treated with any kind of reverence, really. And I think nowadays vinyl is treated with some kind of reverence, apart from my son, and he just leaves them scattered around the floor. But anyway.
I think there's also there's kind of maybe you kind of Silverfish were ahead of their time in a lot of the themes that you were singing about, and the kind of the listening. We went to see Bikini Kill a couple of years ago when they returned. And it was amazing to see a 75% female audience going absolutely nuts. And I was actually listening to Fat Axel before we came on, and realizing that the first song, I was thinking, God, Skunk and Nancy didn't half sound like this in their first album. And your influence stretches down across other bands, and you are mentioned in other things, and I think that's really important. I think because there is a lot of that time, it's a lot of, oh look, it's another band of men that are really deemed important,
Right, aye.
And I think Silverfish, kind of added something of a different perspective to many of the bands at the time, perhaps.
Well, probably. I mean, the fact that when we started, especially the first gig at the Falcon, nobody believed that I was female because of the sound of my voice. They were like, "Oh no, you're not a bird. No, you've got to be a bloke." No, it's definitely a bloke. No, your birds didn't do stuff like that. So and that carried on for quite a while.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And like Babes in Toyland were getting asked who plays their instruments for them and stuff.
I remember
just after they came off stage and stuff. So we might not seem like we've come a long way, but we actually have.
I think that's fair. I mean, I actually did a thing on my website a few years ago where, in conjunction with a friend of mine, me and her asked the question of various women we know of, what are your experiences of going to gigs and clubs? And the results were horrific. Of the comments we got back and we posted, and people in bands going, oh, you're the girlfriend of the, no, I'm the singer, and bullshit like this still continues, sadly. We have no intention of revisiting it, but I'm sure we'll get the same stories again if we were to ask it again at some point. But I mean, certainly in terms of some of it has changed, but not enough. I think it's fair to say.
That goes for everything.
Maybe it's time for a new run of the t-shirt, eh?
Aye. What, the Hips, Tits, Lips Power one?
Yeah.
Yes, well, I think so. I think we've actually been talking about that with this coming out, and it's about bloody time we put it out because everybody else is putting it out.
I did notice that when I went looking.
I don't know. There's millions of them. There's bloody millions of them all over the place. Fair enough.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great slogan, and my wife was like, I'd like one of those. I was like, right, I must remember to ask Lesley about this.
I know. I think we should put out another one, an original one, a remake of the original. But trying to get Silverfish, I mean, we're in contact now with Beggars because of the release of the reissues and stuff like that. But trying to get us to agree on anything is like the old herding cats thing, And Stu just does not answer his emails ever. Kind of thing. It was always
folks.
I know it was always bloody contrary anyway. So.
But it's certainly, it's certainly of the time. It still sounds pretty fresh and pretty damned angry as well, as it probably should. But it's kind of amazing to think that you went from that to Ruby. I think that was one of the real shocks. And I remember when Saltpeter came out, I was like, hang on a minute. And it was such a shock, but it was a good shock because I think I was, God, how old was I when Saltpeter came out? 17, 18, I think.
Right.
So I went to uni in '96. So, but it was from my teenage years that were listening to everything from Brainiac that I'm wearing now to Girls Against Boys to Skinny Puppy to everything in between. Because at that age you go for everything you can. You try everything and see what sticks. Right.
It's human music.
Oh man, and I think I still am. But I think what, there was so much that was almost flying everywhere in that mid-90s period. And I think you mentioned about kind of creation collapsing and Sony not really having an interest. They weren't the only one, because I was thinking back recently that there were a ton of labels that dumped a load of bands around the turn of the millennium when everyone realized that kind of alternative bands weren't really a thing anymore and it was time for the next thing. And suddenly all these bands suddenly got left without a home and loads of them disappeared all at once. And it was kind of, it makes me wonder what we lost around about that time because of that.
I know. I think they kind of seem to. I was very aware in dealing, certainly with major labels in the States, that they just seem to have a cull every couple of years, certainly of the folk who worked for them, and then they would have a cull of whatever bands that they'd ploughed shitloads of money into, or some that hadn't done what they wanted them to do, or were a bit too difficult, or some bloody thing, But I think that's just par for the course for major labels.
Quite. It's a sadly short-termist thing, right?
I totally. I mean, artist development doesn't exist.
How are you finding? Because obviously you've been pretty independent ever since, and in terms of a lot of the, like your own stuff, you've been releasing, self-releasing. Did you make a conscious decision that was the way you were going to go?
I think so. I mean, there's a part of me that would quite like to be on a wee label again, the same as Creation, because Creation were brilliant. And it would be nice to be part of that kind of family framework, because sometimes it's just kind of mind-crushingly tedious sitting in your kitchen here 24 hours a day, looking at one screen and not having anybody to talk to, and not being part of any bigger system. You know, I mean, I would never want to be on a major label again. I would never want to be part of that kind of industry thing again, because that was just not me. You know, I had huge problems with that. Just, it's not me. So, and I've always been very kind of fiercely independent in every aspect of my life anyway. So, I mean, I do love sitting and having full control over everything I'm doing and stuff, but it just gets fucking tedious sometimes. just like,
So kind of, let's go either end of all of this. So what were the bands that got you into making music in the first place, that got you onto the track of going, I'm going to be in a band?
Oh God, I mean, that must have started really early, because we were always really into music. And especially my big brother was quite a big influence on me. I mean, I would just follow whatever he was listening to, whether it was like punk stuff or, oh God, John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and you know, like just and jazz stuff, and most of which I can't remember now, but that was he was very much an influence on me until obviously we left home and went to different parts of the country and stuff. And I suppose I was just I don't know. I mean, I used to listen to shitloads of different types of music all the time, I suppose, and I always wanted to combine them. I think, you know, I mean, I loved the Bangles. When I was starting in Silverfish, that was one of my mainstays, was that Bangles album all the time, you know, and
right.
but like, so there was that, there were like Bangles, Big Black, you know, and Bottle Surfers and whatever else kind of, you know.
And suddenly Silverfish makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, there's just loads of stuff, and Swans and I mean, I suppose there was like Big Black and Swans and folk that was mainly going to see play live and stuff, and then I'd go home and listen to the Bangles.
Did you ever see Swans when they returned in the last decade or so?
No, I haven't.
My God,
really?
I've been to. I think I saw them 5 times over the last decade before before he ended it again. I went to that first show in London in 2010. That was one of the most intense experiences of my life, because they came on and did the opening track that took half an hour, and a load of people had raced down the front of the of Coco, not wearing earplugs.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and Thor came out and playing on his little bells for about 10 minutes, and then suddenly the rest of the band starts coming out, and then 20 minutes in, all hell breaks loose, and suddenly there's this rush of people running back from the front, and we're there with us earplugs in, going, "Fucking hell, this is loud." Watching these guys going, "How? I don't know how they're doing this." And it was just like 2 hours after they finished, 2 hours afterwards, we're all like, Jesus, I've been wearing earplugs all night, and I'm not going to hear for 3 days after this. It was, and obviously it was sweaty and hot as he likes it, and it was kind of finally worshipping at the temple of Michael Gira, but that was quite an experience.
Wow.
What about nowadays? Is there anything particular that you listen to, or are you keeping your kind of almost omnivorous ways in terms of music?
I totally, all over the place. I mean, I listen to like, my son keeps playing Kendrick Lamar in the car, and I think it's great, you know. And I mean, I suppose I don't really listen to like noisy, heavy stuff anymore. I suppose there's bits and pieces, but it's much more kind of melodic stuff, I suppose, and kind of experimental stuff, I suppose. I can't remember what. I'm looking at my phone here, thinking, what kind of stuff do I listen to? But it's kind of all over the place, really.
And what about new kind of, because obviously I think you mentioned that there might be another Ruby album coming at some point. Is that still a plan?
Yes, it is. I've been basically since I released Waiting for Light, I've been collecting, working on a bunch of new songs, and I was hoping to have it out in 2017, and then I can't remember what happened. Something else catastrophic happened anyway. But I think I'll rework most of them. Mm-hmm. I've got the Saltpeter remake is ready to go, but it's just finding the time to get it out and finding somewhere to produce vinyl that
yes, of course,
doesn't that doesn't, because it's the way I've recorded it, all the songs are longer, so it now needs to be a double album, and then we need to make a nice gatefold sleeve and all that kind of stuff and make it into a really nice kind of package. Mm-hmm. So there's all that to be thought of, and then the new album, which will hopefully come out next year, is called Built for Storms, and it's just all in bits all over the place, really, mostly in my head. There's loads of, I must have about 10 or 12 songs that are all in various stages of decomposition and stuff, because I go back to them and then I start farting about, and I usually end up with like 3 or 4 iterations on the same session and stuff, and there's shit all over the place and bits missing, and you know, so I'm quite a messy worker, but so I need to go in and kind of edit those down and see what I've got again, because I've kind of forgotten. I've been working on the Saltpeter stuff for you know, the past year and a half. So yes, there will be one day new stuff.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I mean, would you plan on touring it again, or is that something you'd rather not do anymore? I kind of in this new era of COVID, I don't know.
Oh fuck yeah! I'm quite happy to get out there. I would at some point. I mean, obviously, as long as it's safe enough for everybody to be together in one place and stuff, you know. I really should have embraced the idea of online gigs and, you know, doing re-shows online, but I've never quite got that far.
Some people have done it really well, and some people have like done it where the sound quality was awful and the video quality was awful, and you've clearly not got the connection to do it, and you're like, and you charge money for this. This is really annoying. And then other bands did stuff for free that was incredible quality, and it was very much a mix and match. But obviously, we were just looking for whatever, you know, missing out on all the gigs we did last year. I think many of us were just like, we'll turn up and listen to whatever's going on, frankly, because it's something to do.
Well, I've often thought, like, I suppose the thing is, though, I end up yabbering so much at my gigs nowadays, you know, and just talking shite with the audience. And usually I play tiny wee places with just a few folk, you know, when I'm playing on my own, and it's like having your mates round and playing some tunes, and that's the kind of thing that I like, you know. So I think if I was going to do any kind of live stuff, first of all, it would probably be really low key kind of acoustic, or just a wee bit of backing track and a bit of singing, but mostly just hanging out and having a natter, you know, and drinking beer and stuff.
I mean that sounds good to me. If it's like last time, that works for me entirely fine, you know. But yeah, I think it's, you know, it sounds like there's a good future, and you know, the current's doing pretty well too. So it has been a pleasure to talk to you tonight. Thank you for
you too. I don't get out much these days. Really nice.
I'm beginning to feel I don't either. But yeah, it's again, thank you so much for this, because it's been an utter pleasure, and we will do you want to plug your places online while we're here, so that
I think if you just look for at Ruby Wooby Doodah, that's Ruby as in Ruby, Wooby as in Ruby with a W, and D-O-O-D-A-H, Ruby Wooby Doodah, you'll find me. Or at Lesley Rankine.
That's easy to find. Works for me. Right, marvelous. Well, thank you very much. Let me stop.
You're very welcome. Cheers. Anytime.